Hi, everybody. Welcome tonight. I'm really glad that you've joined us. My name is Patrick. I'm here with Natasha Sherbinin of NDS College Consulting and Chloe Martinez, who's in her second year at Syracuse and is herself a former Putney student travel student. And we're here to discuss summer programs and how they can make college applications come to life. And so this is going to be about 45 minutes long. We'll have a Q&A at the end. You can ask questions throughout. There should be a Q&A panel there. We'll try and save a lot of them so that everyone can hear the answers to them. And we've also had a poll there just so that we know who we're talking to. We invited a lot of our teacher and educator friends, our past students, and our parents. So thank you. As I mentioned, my name is Patrick. I've been with Putney Student Travel for 25 years. I've created programs in Spain and Argentina, Italy, Malawi, China, South Africa, the DR, and really all of that comes about because when I was 16, I am from a small town in New Hampshire. I took my first ever plane ride of my life, and it took me to Spain to live with a host family for a year, and it completely changed my life. They are my second family. I go back every year to see them, and it's led me to Georgetown, and then ultimately, here to Putney Student Travel, where I get to create these kinds of educational experiences that were so important to me. And this particular topic of discussion, this particular webinar, comes about because over the course of my time here, I would say that one of the most common questions that we get asked on the phone when people call us is, will this program help my student, or if the student's calling, will help me get into college? And I have to say that my answer is a little bit of a disappointing one, which is no. And I oftentimes go on to say, please don't come on a program if that's the reason. But then I usually go on to say that having said that, what we do, and this is whether you're on a small group trip, like a career program like Chloe was on, she did sports management in Barcelona, whether it's a language program or a service program or one of our big Oxford academia programs, what we try and do is provide fertile ground for students to grow, to change, to discover things about themselves that they wouldn't otherwise maybe have the opportunity to do. It's the students who plant the seed, and it's the students and the leaders and their fellow students who grow that together, both on the program and then after the program. And if you want to be involved in that process, if you want to, and that process oftentimes results in big changes for you, and it does result in things that you want to talk about when you're doing your college essays. So then, yes, definitely come on a program if that's what you're looking for. Just don't come on a program because you want to, you want to sort of pick a college essay off the shelf, just like you were buying a box of cereal. I wouldn't want you to take my word for this. That's why both Chloe and Natasha are here. So I'm going to introduce Natasha. She and I know each other because she led our Spain language immersion program in 2015. And our language immersion programs are some of the most difficult programs to lead because you have to do everything that you do on our other programs and do it in a different language. And we have fortunately kept in touch since that time. Over the last decade, she has worked in a number of capacities as a high school college advisor, now with her own college advising practice. She's been primarily on the East Coast from Boston and New York, but she works with students and institutions all over the country. So I really appreciate her being here to lead us and to give us her insights. And so I'll turn it over to her. Like I say, feel free to ask questions that we can answer at the end in the question and answer. And thank you for answering the poll. Natasha, over to you.
Thanks so much, Patrick. I'm so excited to be here. I think I have the best job in the world, but Patrick, you might have the second best, being able to plan trips for high school students. And certainly leading a Putney trip was one of my favorite professional experiences that I've had. So with that, I'm gonna go ahead and share a screen here. Oh, Patrick, I'm gonna send a request to you to allow me to do that. And, as Patrick mentioned, I lead my own consulting firm for college admissions, NDS College Consulting, but did have the experience of leading Putney trips, and I've worked with high school students for the bulk of my career. And I work with students across the country on building thoughtful college applications that are really rooted in who they are, not who they think colleges want them to be. And so tonight is really about reframing what matters in high school, especially when it comes to programs like Putney's. We're going to explore how genuine curiosity and engagement can really lead to personal growth and, as a side effect, a stronger college application. So with that, let me go ahead and share my screen. I'm going to go into presenting mode. Give me 1 second. Okay. All right, great. So we're going to start off. So you can all see this. Patrick, if something looks funny on the screen, please unmute yourself and let me know, but I'm going to assume everything looks good. Okay, so we're going to start off by talking about why pre-college travel matters. It's very powerful, right? If you had the experience to travel yourself to a foreign country or even within the US, travel can really be a transformative experience. And in high school, it's important that students can, expand their boundaries, particularly if they're coming from small towns like New Hampshire, where Patrick grew up. But even students who are exposed to a lot more if they live in a city still can really benefit. I don't have to sell you all on this, from really having an immersive experience in a different country. And to Patrick's point, it's not to look good on the college application, but and actually, in fact, I'll say that if a student only goes for that reason, it can often backfire because admissions counselors really can sniff out inauthentic experiences on the college application. But when students travel, they and really invest that time in something they're truly interested in, whether it's language or culture, sustainability, community, whatever it happens to be. That's really when the magic can happen, right? Travel helps students discover new passions. You'll hear from Chloe a little bit about how she explored a new passion on her trip, and it led to a career interest in what she's majoring in college. It helps build resilience and independence. I shared with Patrick earlier today that a lot of the parents, after I led my trip in Spain, got back to me and said, I cannot believe the maturity that happened in 6 weeks through this, or 4 weeks, whatever it was through that program. It's a short period of time, but they really, because it's the first time they're living on their own, are required to learn how to be independent pretty quickly. And it gives them that confidence to be independent too. It helps them develop cultural understanding and empathy, and most of all, gain stories and insights that can shape who they are becoming in the future. And yes, lead to maybe a college essay, but more on that to come. So those are some of the things that really make a student compelling as a person first, and then as an applicant. And parents, I'm curious, you don't have to put any responses in if you don't want to, but I'm curious, as you're thinking through your own experiences, as you're listening to this webinar today, what was an experience that really shaped who you were when you were a teenager? Was it something that you did just to build a resume, or to land a job or get into college? Or was it something that you did kind of out of curiosity and adventure? So take yourself back to your teenage years and really think about that transformative experience that really kind of shaped who you are maybe today. Okay, so some factors to consider when selecting a program. First and foremost, thinking about, will this get my child into college, right? As Patrick mentioned. The better question is, will this experience help my child grow? Will it help them stretch and discover something meaningful about themselves, maybe something they didn't know about themselves? So looking for programs that really spark genuine excitement, that your student just lights up when they read more about that program. They say, yes, this is it. This is what I want to learn more about. A program that really offers a challenge, it stretches them a little bit, and is immersive, right? So they can really go fully into that program for that 4 to 6 weeks, whatever the time frame might be. Patrick and I are also talking about Putney's decision to make their programs tech-free, and how that can really be a part of that challenge for students. Teenagers, but all of us, are really addicted to our phones. And to put away your phone and fully immerse and be present for that experience will obviously lead to a more transformative experience for everyone involved. But that is, I think, something really impressive to share in your college application eventually, that you went tech-free, and maybe what was that challenge like, and what did you learn as a result? Also thinking about choosing programs that will allow you to build community, whether that's the community within the cohort of students that you're with, or build community with the folks that you are meeting in the countries where you're traveling. And then finally, matching your students' readiness for independence. So thinking about, are they ready for this opportunity? We really want to make sure that, yes, we're stretching them, but still within a little bit of that zone of comfort so they can really get the most out of that opportunity. One of the biggest misconceptions that I see is that students and families really think they need to do a ton of impressive things throughout high school, right? Like a full laundry list, so they can fill their Common App with at least 10 activities, really showing admissions counselors, like, this is all that I do. But in reality, colleges value depth much more than they do breadth. So one transformative experience can fuel essays, interviews, and academic direction far more than 15 kind of scattered activities. And I see this all the time. My students who put together really compelling applications are ones that have invested time and dedicated more time to maybe 1, 2 activities. Sure, they might be doing a couple other in the background, but they're not stretching themselves so thin that they're, only dipping their toes superficially into a few activities. So in this context, that means really, again, choosing that program and immersing yourself while you're there. So once a student has the experience, the next step, which many students skip and teenagers skip, is reflection. So really making sure that they're taking that time during the program and certainly after the program to reflect on that experience. And again, I see it all the time with my students who may have done a program like a Putney's, maybe between their sophomore and junior year, and now it's a year later and they're trying to pull out those experiences and write about them meaningfully for their essays. And that can be really tricky to do because they often forget a lot of the details. They forget a lot of the feelings or emotions that go into those experiences while they're happening. So the more that they can write down about those experiences while they're happening, the better. And this doesn't need to be anything formal. It can be, sketching or blogging if they are really wanting to share outside of, their own community. But even voice memos or journaling can really be effective. Even just like taking a couple bullet points, right? I think about my students who are writing about a summer experience for their main college app essay, so the Common App essay. And they often will need to think about a hook, right? How do they pull the audience in? And I'm encouraging students in that moment to show versus tell. So using a lot of imagery. What were you seeing? What did you hear? What did you smell? And if students can write those things down soon after they happen in that moment, maybe that night or the next day, about these experiences that they're having that they feel like are really transformative, that makes it that much easier to write about those essays later on. If they try to do it later on and they're just kind of making it up, they're like, I think this is what happened, it comes off a little bit more superficial. So again, I cannot stress how important it is to spend that time on the reflection during and after. It really is what turns the whole program, the whole experience into growth for your teen. An important distinction I want to make, though, is that reflection isn't necessarily about crafting a college essay. It's about meaning making. So when students reflect honestly, not with an angle, not thinking about, is this what college admissions counselors want to hear? Maybe I should drop this in, right? Because I heard that this is what they want to hear. But really sharing insights that they gained organically and making that become the heart of their essays later on. And I say essays because most students will also have supplemental essays that they need to write for colleges. And I see that these programs can often be great material for those as well. Patrick and I were chatting earlier today about not coming off as, sounding too cliche in your essays, because if you don't take the time to do the reflection, that is kind of the risk. Often students are nervous to write about if they did have a summer program experience, They may have heard, oh, you shouldn't write about that because everyone writes about that. It's too common of a topic. You don't want to have a cliche essay. And that can be true if it's not done in a really, I would say, vulnerable, deep way. If you're just scratching the surface and you're not really sharing much about yourself or your values or what you really gained from that experience, it can come off as cliche. Especially nowadays when AI is available for students to use on their college essays. What I'm seeing with this application cycle is that students are all going to submit well-written essays. It used to be that college would sometimes assign a score to how well written the essay was. Duke was an example of a school that would do this, right? They assign a score, I think it was 1 to 7, of the essay. How well crafted was the essay? Now with AI, I think it's safe to assume that any student can really submit a well-written, well-crafted essay. So what's really going to set them apart is how deep is it, how personal, I mean, it's called the personal essay, but how personal is that essay, right? How much are you actually sharing about those insights that you gained or the values that you have, the vulnerability? Again, I go back to that word because I do think it's so important to be vulnerable and authentic in the personal essay. Otherwise, it's going to come off as an essay that anyone else could have written. I could talk, this whole thing could be about essays, right? So I'm not going to go into too much more depth there. Feel free to drop any questions in the chat. I wouldn't stray away from the topic necessarily, but don't write about it just because it feels like a topic you can write about. It should be a topic you choose because it feels like this is such an important, or this was such an important experience in my growth and my high school experience that I should write about it. So that said, this kind of segues well into what does all this mean in terms of the college application? So when a student has an experience that they've engaged with deeply, the storytelling, as I was mentioning, really becomes effortless, right? Because it's rooted in something real, it's rooted in something authentic. Admissions counselors read hundreds of essays every year that sound like, I care about the environment. From this experience, I learned a lot about leadership, teamwork, cooperation, like fill in the blank, right? Any kind of word that they think that college admissions counselors want to hear about. Those essays all really blend together. So as I was mentioning, the essays that really stand out are essays that show sensory detail, really convey curiosity and openness and willingness to learn, vulnerability and insight. So I'm going to share a quick example, and then I'm really excited to stop talking for a minute, and I talk really quickly, so I apologize about that, so that Chloe can jump in and share her own personal experience. But let me share a quick example. So a student spends maybe 2 weeks on a trip in Costa Rica with Putney, right? They learn about sustainability while living in a rainforest eco lodge. And instead of just going through the motions, doing the activities, they really take advantage of that opportunity. They're present, they're fully there. They ask questions of the local farmers. They keep a daily journal about what they're learning and even sketch out how these practices could apply back home. So later, fast forward to a year later, when they're writing their Common App essay, they don't just say, I care about the environment, it's important to me. They describe waking up at dawn to help plant coffee seedlings, feeling the soil under their nails, that real sensory detail that they may have just completely forgotten about if they hadn't captured it in the moment. And then the moment they realize that sustainability is about community as much as it is about science. So that's that depth really of observation and reflection is going to catch an admissions counselor's attention because it goes beyond just the surface level. I learned about leadership, I learned about whatever XYZ. It's really showing them authentic engagement, a nuanced perspective, something that might be unexpected, right? Not just that surface level interest. So what made that powerful, that story powerful, and that essay powerful isn't just about going to Costa Rica, right? It's about the depth of engagement. So without journaling, asking questions, and reflecting, that experience would have stayed surface level too. So to Patrick's point earlier about like, should I go to this program just to get into college? The student really needs to take advantage of the opportunity while they're there if they expect it to be a transformative experience for themselves, right? So they have to fully immerse themselves in that experience. That has to happen even before we get to the college application piece. If that doesn't happen, it's not going to translate well to a college application in any way, right? So the first step is really to have them fully immersed. The student really needs to be invested, excited, curious in those moments. And then if that happens, maybe, right? Maybe they have some moments that will translate well to the college application. I imagine they will. I think that just kind of happens naturally. But all that said, I don't have to just make this up, right? We have Chloe here who knows about the power of Putney's programs and can really share a little bit more about her own experience. So I'm going to pass it over to Patrick to introduce Chloe.
Great. Thank you, Natasha. Yeah, when you say someone who is interested, passionate, and engaged, Chloe leaps to mind. I have to say, I first got to know her in a kind of embarrassing way. And it's because I created our Barcelona sports management program. So one of my very good friends from that year when I was 16, when I was in Barcelona, she became the marketing head for an international graduate level sports management organization called the Johan Cruyff Institute that has its headquarters in Barcelona. It has a school in Amsterdam, one in Lima. They're wonderful. And she and I together sort of created the first high school program that we know of that exposes students to these kinds of experiences with graduate level instructors. So my first interaction with Chloe was because in the inaugural year of the program, 2022, I had to call her up and say, Chloe, I don't know you yet. We have 24 students on the program. It's absolutely full, but you are the only girl. Is that okay? I wanted to give you a heads up so that you didn't you didn't arrive in the airport. And I remember being really nervous to make the call. And she said, yes, I'm okay with this. Sports is my passion. I want to do this. And fast forward to this fall, Chloe reached out to me just to tell me that she was now in her second year at Syracuse. She's studying public relations as her major. She has a minor in Spanish and a minor in sports management as well. And that trip was one that was important to her. She did end up writing her college essay about it, and I'll let her describe that to you. But for many reasons. So maybe Chloe, maybe we can start off with, you told me a little bit about how the experience became your college essay. Can you share that?
Yeah, of course. So my story was a little bit unique than others. And I remember, so actually, I wasn't the one who thought about this. It was the last day. I was at the airport in Barcelona. And, it's so funny when you say about journaling because I was one of those trips that you didn't have your phone for that time. And I journaled the most, like, in that time, like, I journaled every single day, every single thing I was thinking, and I genuinely, at the airport, just looked so sad because I had loved the people that I was around, and I had just loved Barcelona. So, I'm I'm almost, like, at security, like, checking in my bag, and this lady, she's, like, about, like, her 20s, mid-20s, she comes up to me and she's like, "Are you okay? Like, you're the only girl with all these guys, is something like, do you need help?" And I was like, "Oh, no, I'm fine." And then I had explained to her about my whole program and just I got into a great conversation with her and she said, "Oh my gosh, ding, 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 your college essay." And I was like, wait, because I had just turned 16, like I was just entering my junior year. I was like, "Oh my gosh, wait, can this be a college essay?" And then funny enough, I love Putney that I went to do a trip again in the summer and the Tour de France was on. I had never watched it before and it was amazing. And that year had also premiered a Netflix documentary about Tour de France. And then I watched it with my mom and that somehow became my tie with my college essay. My college essay was basically about how one of the riders on the Tour de France and how we overcame our journey and I compared my journey to his. So
um, I love that because it took something that could have been sort of devastating, right? That you were the only girl on the trip. And I think it told a story about, and just to be clear, since that year, we have made an enormous effort, and even during that year, to equalize things a bit. We now have about 10 out of the 24 participants each year are girls. Half of the presenters and people that we work with who have careers in sports are women, and so it's an important part of the program to show that it's not just about the boys. And it's great to hear that Chloe took something that really showed her character that was an adverse situation, potentially adverse situation, and her leaders. I remember, one of her leaders, Veronica, lives in Madrid, is a good friend of mine, and her just saying like Chloe was amazing on the program. Like she could have like retreated into her shell. She could have done any number of things. Instead, she went out there. She put herself out there. She learned so much. I'm curious, Chloe, like how did that program and the France program like either shape your choice of Syracuse or like what you've done so far? Because I don't want to spill the beans, but you just told me a couple minutes ago that you just got an internship in Switzerland for a couple weeks this summer, which is congratulations. That's really wonderful.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I'm going to focus more on the Barcelona trip because that really was kind of my wake-up call and okay, I want to go into sports. I mean, sports is such a male-driven industry that I knew that if I could get through this trip, like I can get through anything. And I remember like hearing about the presenters and just like hearing about their lives. And I was like, I want to do this. And honestly, that trip has just been my motivation to do anything and to really put myself out there. Like right now, I am set to be the social media director for our men's club hockey team. I work with the D1 athletics team, and it's just such a diverse group. And really, I have to thank Putney and just that group in general, because I learned how to really just like talk with strangers. I mean, I learned so much about communication. I learned so much about myself. I mean, I would have never known that I would love event planning. Do you mind if I tell the quick story?
Oh yeah.
Okay, so 16-year-old me was just wanting to do something in Barcelona. And I remember 5 minutes away from our dorm, there was this kind of like amphitheater, and it was filled, like a garden was like on the outside. It was just incredible. And there were these pillars and they were huge, and just like it had names of all these artists. And I see like Jessie J is one of the names. And like I had never been like a huge fan, but I was like, I know her songs. So I had went to my leader and I was like, hey, like I want to go to this concert. Like, is there any way? Like, would you go with me? And she's like, if you can get 7 of those guys to go with you, you got it. Let me tell you, I spent a whole Saturday trying to convince these guys, and I got all of them to come. So talk about learning conversation skills. Talk about business negotiation. But I just remember like planning that trip because she was like, if you want her, like you got it. Because she also had like faith in me. Like she was like, I know she's got this. And I had planned it out, like the logistics. I was like, look, these are the tickets. Like it's only a 5-minute walk. Like I had presented this to all of our leaders, and they were like, Chloe, you can definitely go. Like we're gonna get the tickets. Like done deal. And I always talk about that specific experience in the trip because it's really helped shape like even my career path. Since like I loved like seeing all the logistics, I was like, I kind of want to do something in events. And even like just this program, I want to do stuff in community relations, bringing kind of like those nonprofits or bringing like a group and connecting it with a sports organization. And I don't think I would have gotten, I guess, that insight if I wouldn't have done the trip. So
That's great. I'd love to bring Natasha back too, just to sort of wrap this up. But one of the things that, as you tell that story, that occurs to me that no matter whether it's a Putney student travel summer or another kind of summer experience, what you were doing there was the opposite of just consuming an experience. Because when you just consume an experience, your only opportunity is to judge it. It was good, it was bad. You are actually producing the experience. And I think that is what leads to these kind of transformative summers things that you do want to write a college essay about because you were a part of the process. You didn't just sit back and say, hey, can someone else do this for me? You said, can you help me to do this thing that wouldn't have existed without my participation? And I think that both when you're looking for the kinds of experiences to do during the summer, but also when you're there doing them, constantly keeping that in mind. Like, how can I be a part of this? How can I be involved in this beyond just consuming it? I want to be a producer of experience for other people. And so I think you exemplify that. So thank you. It made my day when you sent me that email earlier this year, and it's really great to hear again now. So thank you, Chloe.
No, I love the program. Like, I always am like looking to like give back in some way. I mean, it's just like I wouldn't have been at Syracuse if it weren't for that summer. So I believe that.
Well, Natasha, we can wrap it up, and then so far there haven't been any questions. If there are, you have a couple minutes to type them in as we wrap this up. We're going to do some takeaways, and thank you for joining.
Great. Chloe, I love that story. I could just see the opening of your college essay all about the Jessie J concert, and just so much voice coming into that essay as well. I love it. All right, so as we wrap up before QA, just a few core takeaways to share. One is choosing experiences, again, that really spark curiosity and stretch you or your child, engaging fully and authentically once they're there. And again, just a plug for those tech-free programs. I just think that is so important in this day and age. Taking the time to reflect during and after. Chloe, I love that you were journaling during your program. That's incredible. And I'm sure you got a lot more out of experience because of the time that you took to journal. And then trust that if you do all of those things, the essays, interviews, and the application narrative will just naturally emerge. Chloe, it sounds like you got so much out of your experience. Again, that one Jessie J example could have been your entire college essay, but it feels like you had so many of those moments throughout your trip that you probably had just like a stockpile of material to choose from when it came to writing about those experiences as part of your application. So that's very, very cool. All right, so now we'll open up for questions. Anything, for Patrick about Putney or travel programs, any specific questions for Chloe, of course, about her experience, and then I'm happy to answer any more college admissions focused questions. So yeah, what questions do you all have?
So far, we only have one question, which asking if we could accommodate students who have celiac disease, and the answer to that is yes. Some countries are. Spain is actually a very easy country for celiac. Other countries, I'm thinking more along the lines of Vietnam. Our programs in Cambodia maybe might be a little bit tougher, but we have had a large number of students across the years who have celiac. That is another kind of challenge that can be fruitful and to overcome. I'm thinking specifically, we had a student with some pretty severe food allergies who their first trip outside the country was a growth experience for a couple of reasons. One, because they were going to, it was a CARS program in Germany and Sweden that we have, our career CARS, but she was managing, obviously with the help of her leaders, some allergies throughout in ways that she hadn't done before by her, without her parents around. And we worked on a plan to do that beforehand. And I think that, from the feedback from her and from the leaders, the growth that came out of doing that in the supportive context was actually something that was a big contributor to what she took away from the summer. So it doesn't, sometimes it's not the thing that you're looking for or that you think would be immediately obvious that is the source of the growth or even the story that you want to end up telling. I think her story about that program would have been much more about her interacting with some of the chefs in the restaurants and like talking about her allergies and doing it herself than maybe the whole CARS aspect of it, and really showing her personal growth that way. So well, great. Well, we don't have any other questions right now, so I just want to thank you again to Natasha and to Chloe for sharing your insights and your experiences, and really appreciate everyone who's seen this. We'll send it around in a link too if you want to share it with anybody else for whom it might be helpful. don't hesitate to reach out to us about any summer programs, or to Natasha if you're looking for any college consulting. Here's her contact information. Like I say, she's been doing this for over a decade, is incredibly knowledgeable and connected within this world. And I think anyone would be lucky to work with her. And Chloe, thank you and congratulations again on the internship. And I can't wait to hear what you do in the next couple of years at college and beyond.
Patrick, a few more questions actually just came in.
Oh yes, okay. So the first question is, how would you contrast an Australia journey versus studying at Oxford when it comes to a college application? Interesting question, because there are an Australia journey, for example, is one where there's a lot of time spent outdoors doing different activities. It's a lot of travel. It's a lot of different cultural immersion. I would go back, and Natasha, correct me if you think I'm wrong. I would go back to what Natasha said. It really depends on what the student is going to connect with, because the student might look at the Oxford program and say, "Oh my goodness, there's like an AI seminar there that like I would die to take, and it's got this Rhodes Scholar professor." And that can be just as impactful and transformative as something which on the surface of it is a lot more exotic. And this is advice that I give oftentimes when students are trying to choose between a couple of different programs that are in the same genre. I want to do a service trip, but I don't know whether to go to Peru or to Ecuador. And I oftentimes say, like, look at the pictures, think about what you know about those places, what makes your heart leap. That's where you need to go, because that gives you the best chance. So, Natasha, do you have any thoughts about that?
I think you nailed it. I would just say choosing the experience that's really going to, again, light your student up, right? What is going to spark their curiosity? It's really going to be up to the student to get the most out of that experience. And when they walk away from that program, whichever program you think is going to, or the student thinks, right, is going to potentially shape their future in some way. I know it's hard to predict that. But I would just choose authentically which program sings to them. And then with the application, I always say when it comes to the college essay, the topic actually doesn't matter. It's how you write about it. And maybe I'd kind of make a connection here with the program. The program doesn't really matter in terms of getting into college. It's what you're going to take away from that program, like the experience that you're going to have and what you're going to make of it. And how much you really invest in that opportunity is going to be much more important than the type of the program, an academic program versus more of a travel program.
Great. We have a couple of questions about if a student is returning for another summer, either with Putney Student Travel or with another organization, let's say. One, how do you deal with friends that you might have made that you didn't know in the previous summer? Should you travel with them this summer? I guess my advice would be, it's unusual that you would find friends who would have the exact same growth pattern as you. And what we do on all of our small group trips is we actually limit the amount of friends who can come. Typically on a group of 16 to 18, it might only be 2 pairs of friends before we say to anyone else who comes in as a pair, hey, you might want to try this other program, this other unit of the program. And that is because there's some really wonderful things about those friendships. But they, in the context of really immersing yourself in a new experience, those sort of comparisons, either to last summer and the time you had, or the fallback of being able to, you're going to connect with this one person already, can sometimes be a barrier to making new connections, which will drive that growth. It's not impossible. I think that on larger programs, on an Oxford Academia program, a couple of these other ones that are like our MIT program, it's easier to go to the same program and have different experiences. Whereas on the small group trips, I typically would discourage it, or have a really frank talk with your friend about how you are going to make sure that you are both having your own experience and able to, integrate and grow in your own personal ways. And I would say that too, just in terms of advice for thinking about, even if you're not coming back from a friend, if you're thinking about another summer, I would take the things that were challenging to you or exciting to you in the place that you went and look to take kind of the next step with those, whether that's specificity, like going on like a career program, doing farm to table in Italy, for example, if you really loved the food aspect of your traveling program, or taking a specific seminar, but showing sort of, either trying something totally different, or going a little bit more in depth. And then this one is for you, Natasha. How can students balance writing about an experience that challenged them while keeping the tone sort of growth oriented and forward looking? And Chloe, you did this, so for both of you, I think.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it's really a great opportunity for students to highlight challenges when they're talking, when they're thinking about their college essay topic. A challenge, it doesn't you don't have to write about challenge, but if you have a meaningful challenge, it can be a good topic. The trick is keeping that challenge, describing the challenge, to about a third of your essay or less, right? So maybe at the very beginning, you're going to describe that challenge, but you're going to spend the whole rest of that essay talking about what you learned, the growth, and then what you've done since then. So, maybe you face a challenge and now you learned that we'll just use Chloe's example, right? Really enjoy maybe being a minority in situations, right? Maybe you shine. I don't know if this is true, Chloe, but maybe you shine, right, when you're the only female in the room of all men. And so that is a cool thing to learn about yourself. And then maybe you're seeking out other opportunities. You're no longer worried about being the only one in the room. Just as an example. So, right, thinking about forward thinking, spending most of that essay on the positive stuff after the challenge.
Yeah. When I was writing about it, I did the same thing, that I was like, okay, I'm going to write about being the only girl in like the first thing, but I'm not going to highlight it because I had a specific challenge where, like, specifically in that group, being the only girl. So like I spent like 2 lines after explaining that. And then I went to, okay, that happened, but look what I did after to regain my position. So like that kind of was like my essay, was that I didn't know, like, it was just kind of me getting into my head, and I let them know that, like, I was like, oh, like, I feel like I'm just like kind of like an outsider, which was not the case at all. It was just me being me being Chloe. And I let them know I kind of was vulnerable. But then I said, hey, because I was thinking all of this, then it kind of led me to do all of these things. And then that was a majority of my essay. And then kind of just tying it into, okay, I did this, and now that's how I found like what I want to do with my career.
I love that. I love that it presents the facts of the challenge. It doesn't dwell on them, because what's really important is the growth that it's fueled, or the kinds of experiences that you now feel prepared for or want to have because of that challenge, but it doesn't sort of wallow in the challenge. Great. I think we have time for one more question. This is for all of us. Do you have any advice for students who might not immediately recognize how that travel experience shaped them until much later? I guess when I read that, I sort of think about travel is sort of a Trojan horse in that way. That like there are things that sneak in when you're kind of doing other things you might not realize until much later. And I think again, from my perspective, that's actually an interesting thought to follow, and to trace. If you have something that is making an impact in you now, and you can trace it back to an earlier experience, and then sort of see how, whether you've been conscious of it or not, how that might have shaped you. And then now that you are conscious of it, what does it mean? Like, what does it mean that you want to do now, or where are you going to take that now that it has bubbled to the surface of your awareness? I don't know. That was spitballing.
Yeah, no, that's great. In the context of the college application, I think this presentation really focused on how you can write about your travel experience. I didn't say it explicitly, but I think it's important to note you don't have to write about your college or your travel experience in your college essay, right? The reverse is also true. And so just because you had an experience that should have been transformative, if you haven't had the time to reflect on that, or it hasn't become clear to you how that experience has been transformative to you, don't force it, right? I think if anything, you hopefully took away from this presentation that authenticity is really key in the whole college application, but definitely the essay. And so don't try to force it by making it the topic if it doesn't feel like it resonates. It's kind of similar to the advice I always give for a student who might be going through a challenge in that moment. if they haven't had enough time to reflect on that experience and take a step back out of that experience and really understand what happened and the growth that happened as a result, it's probably not a good topic, right? They're still in it. So, right, a number of reasons why it doesn't have to be your essay topic. But if you have had enough distance from that experience and the reflection comes later, that's fine too. You can still write about it.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't know that I was like, yes, in my story, I had been like, this woman had said you should write about it, but it really honestly, like, I recognized how Barcelona had changed me from talking to people and just like saying how my experience was. So, like, I didn't realize it all, like, in one night. It was really just talking to my parents, talking to my friends, being like, oh my gosh, this happened. They're like, wait, like, you grew a lot from this, you know? I say, like, my biggest advice would just be to talk about it, you know? Like, I'm always someone who says, like, it's okay to be vulnerable and, like, find your people. Like, with my mom, like, I would tell her, like, everything that happened. And then as my mom being my mom, she was like, wait, like, hey, like, you found out this, this, and this. And I would be like, wait, I kind of did. So sometimes it's even that. So biggest thing is just talk about it.
I like that because that also allows you to discover some meanings, and other people that know you well can see that in ways that sometimes you're even too close to, and those changes. That's one of the things that, I mentioned to Natasha when we were talking earlier today. I do find that, for example, I led a dozen different programs over the course of 10 or 12 years, and oftentimes my students would ask me for reference letters for their college applications, because I had gotten to know and see them in a different context and from a different angle than their friends back home or even their parents. And because it had been, something that they were pushing themselves, they were outside of their comfort zones. And so, I love that. I love the idea that, you don't just go into a dark room and with your own brain and try and work this out. That there are a lot of different people that you can go to in your life who can kind of, when you're telling them the story of you and you're telling them the story of what's meaningful to you and what you saw and what you did, they're going to be able to help you kind of pick out the things that they feel that are true changes, and ones that from the outside seem important. So anyway. Well, I want to respect everyone's time. Thank you so much to both of you for joining. Thank you to all of the people who have watched this. We'll send out a link so that you can share this more widely if you want to. Feel free to get in touch with us or with Natasha. And congratulations, Chloe. And can't wait to hear more things about how things go at Syracuse.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much. This was so much fun.
Yes.
Great. All right. Take care. Good night, everybody.
Have a good night. Take care.